staff members to basically generally discuss the project. Previously, it required only the township manager's presence, which created some confusion because while the project might have been economically feasible, it might not necessarily have met planning standards or engineering standards. So it's important for developers when they come in, before they invest any money in land or in drawing up site plans, to know exactly if what they're even planning to do is allowed or not. So to that extent, we now also have project pre-application meeting. It is currently in the zoning ordinance. However, we clarified that that would be a formal meeting with the planning consultant, township engineer, fire department, and any other necessary township staff or officials before a formal submittal of a site plan. So a pre-application meeting, a project concept meeting is not necessary. It's only if somebody wants it. A pre-application meeting is generally recommended if it's a big project. If it's a small project that has done it before, they might choose to direct formally submit if they have a complete set. But for any project that's of any significance, we always advise a pre-application meeting. In both these cases, there is a meeting fee that is established by the township board, and the meeting fee needs to be paid by the developer or the applicant in advance of the meeting. The Planning Commission wanted that clarification to be put into the text, and I have done that. So this is before you tonight for a public hearing to make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees.
Okay. Would anybody from the public like to come up and speak about this topic? All right, I make the motion to close the public hearing.
Support.
Motion by Stanilecho, support by Ms. Chick. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, the motion carries. Thank you. We're going to go on to report from the committees. Board of Trustees, Ms. Chick.
The board met on Tuesday, May 27th. The public hearing was held to consider a preliminary planned unit development at the request of Chestnut Development located west of Whitmore Lake Road and northwest 5 Mile Road, known as Woodfield Farms and Villas. The motion to approve the request with conditions listed in the McKenna, OHM, and Northfield Fire Department reports was approved 7-0. The board also approved a preliminary PUD request from Robertson Brothers Homes for Northfield Preserve west of Whitmore Lake Road and south of North Territorial. The request was motioned and approved also by voice vote 7-0. The board received an update on the status of 75 Barker renovation and whether or not to allow an extension on the deadline specified in the contract to acquire a building certificate. The applicant was awaiting an approval from Washtenaw County Road Commission, which had been delayed. The applicant received notice of approval, but the actual document had not physically been received by the deadline, so the building permit could not be issued at that time. The item was tabled to ensure all documents have been received. As of today, all the documents have been received, and I believe a building permit was issued. A proposal from Tetra Tech and recommended by the Planning Commission for approval by the board, allowing Tetra Tech to provide a study for the master plan update, and any further requested information and consultant time was approved by motion, up to $39,000 with the funds coming from the wastewater treatment plant fund. OHM submitted a proposal to conduct a survey of the 23-acre North Village property, which is comprised of 7 different parcels, in order to split the designated park property from the rest of the property as requested back in 2022. This split was not done. The board is moving on the item and will be determining how the remaining 10+ acres outside the park area will become either one parcel or a number of parcels. The task will take about 2 months at a cost of $7,250. The board approved the proposal. And finally, the 2025 road agreement with Washtenaw County Road Commission was discussed. A budget amount of $217,520 was approved for road work for Kearney Road between Jennings and Barker. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Is there any questions or discussion? All right, thank you. Mr. Zarzecki, ZBA.
ZBA has not met since our last meeting.
Okay. Julie, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, just one thing really quick.
Microphone.
We are working on trying to come up with a date for some training that will be provided by McKenna. Will include Board of Trustees, Planning Commission, and Zoning Board of Appeals. Most likely it will not be in conjunction with the Planning Commission meeting. just given the master plan updates and everything that we have going on. So watch your emails, and we're going to try and come up with a date that is agreeable to most. We're not going to get all people, in attendance, but look for that coming up very soon.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. We don't have a Parks and Rec representative any longer. Land Preservation, Mr. Gordon?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to unfinished business. That is 10A, that is to approve with the conditions or deny site plan for absolute self-storage at 6684 Whitmore Lake Road. That's parcel B0220300018. The case is JPC 230006. Proposes the construction of 2 additional storage buildings and the conversion of an existing warehouse structure into a climate-controlled storage facility. So I take it that the applicant is here. Okay. So we asked you for some things from last time, so you probably want to address some of those things and then go over any concerns or additions you would like to supply us with.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Evans. I'm a representative for Absolute Self Storage. My parents and their partners purchased this property in sometime in 2000. In the first 2 years of ownership, they demolished a large collapsing building, built 2 large pole buildings, and 2 mini warehouses to supplement the 2 original self-storage buildings from the late 1980s. This current 2-building expansion is in support of an ongoing business. Design of the buildings on this site plan match the existing style of the buildings that have been in service since April of 2022. I believe that the current design meets the standards set forth in the Whitmore Lake North Territorial Overlay District, Section 3689, Design Standards E5A. Predominant exterior materials shall be high-quality materials, including but not limited to brick, stone, architectural steel, glass, and decorative masonry units. Architectural steel refers to the use of steel in construction and design of the building structures, encompassing both structural framework and decorative elements. These buildings feature 16-gauge steel covered with 26-gauge colored panels, matching the color and profile of the 5 adjacent buildings, also from Heritage Building Systems, perfectly. I made this map right here. It kind of shows. Can everyone see it? Can everyone see it okay? This is Whitmore Lake Road down here. This is the expressway, US 23 right here. These are the 2 buildings right here from the 1980s. And I just kind of wanted to show a little bit of what here. These blue buildings are the 2 pole buildings and 2 self-storage buildings that were built approximately around 2004. The ones in red are the buildings that were just built that came into service in 2022 and 2023. The orange buildings signify the 2 new buildings that we're going to be putting up now. And I just wanted to make a couple of points about these buildings. So the new ordinance that just came available on, or just came in active on April 8th, has a section cut out for concrete masonry units. And it has a separate thing that refers to industrial buildings. And it says that the plain cinder block restriction is for below ground floors, is limited to front-facing to front facade facing a public right-of-way only. So with that being in mind, looking at this building, proposed building BB, that you can kind of see some before and after shots up here, is this building, the existing building from the 1980s, is actually 50 feet longer. So as far as what you can see from Whitmore Lake Road right here, it's a little bit tough because this is just a 200-foot building next to a 250-foot building. So again, in that packet that I supplied to you guys, there's the first set of 3 pictures kind of addresses this building BB from each angle. One that's kind of where State Street Auto is, a little bit to the south of us, and then one just outside my south gate right here. And then there's a third picture that we actually used for the rendering down here that also shows it with the existing buildings and then what the new building is going to look like between those. So with the new ordinance referring to concrete masonry units, limited to the front facade facing a public right-of-way only. So just looking at building BB, the front facade I would take is this front long side right here. So with that being in mind, with what I take from what that ordinance says is basically the front facing has to be of an elevated design. It can't be plain cinder block. But the other 3 sides essentially can. So that's why I contend that we're increasing, we're actually going beyond what this statute says. And let's jump around just a touch, but let me get back on track. The Planning Commission shall have the authority to waive or modify any of these guidelines or standards upon consideration of the following: existing site design, including architecture, parking, driveways, etc., placed in a manner of which application of these standards provided herein is impractical. Steel and brick are both strong, heavy-duty materials. However, brick doesn't have any flexibility to it. Our 25-foot driveways that run the long ways between the buildings invites wall damage from novice or distracted drivers. A lot of times these people are operating large trailers, large trucks, things like that, and they've got other stuff on their minds. So contact with these buildings components are far too common. Sometimes these customers carry minimal vehicle insurance, leaving us with the burden of cost of repair. Increased masonry is time and material intensive, and it's unnecessary hardship, which increases practical difficulties. My family will continue to expand our business as this community grows, and there's space between the building, new building G, and the expressway right here to actually put in at least 2 more large buildings or 3 buildings as we move closer to the expressway with our expansion. My family will continue to expand the business as the community grows. And then the Planning Commission on April 16th, at the Planning Commission on April 16th minutes regarding the architectural standards, the planning consultant noted at the time of the applicant's first request back in 2019 that the requirement was 100% masonry facade for mini storage, but we received a variance to provide less masonry due to the buildings not being highly visible from the roadways. However, this applicant has made it clear that this situation is different, and the 2 new buildings are clearly visible from US 23 and Whitmore Lake Road, so the conditions that led to the original variance were not the same. So again, I contend that these buildings aren't as visible. The carport that we built here is only 160 feet from our westerly US 23 line, whereas the new building G is actually 200 feet from the expressway. And then during the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting back on July 15th, 2019, the planning consultant said that the proposed use of masonry will not detract from the overall appearance due to the location in an industrial area and the landscape provided. Additionally, the applicant will be afforded substantial justice by approval of these variances, and there will be no detrimental impacts on neighboring properties or public health and safety as a result. The Commission has the discretion to modify these requirements if the modification elevates the quality of architecture. Meeting the purpose of this ordinance, we propose brick wainscot to be more harmonious with the color of all the facade materials used on this building and adjacent buildings. The facade is low reflectance, subtle, and neutral in color. These building materials are durable and rust-proof. The wainscot is harmonious and part of our brand. I believe that the Planning Commission has the authority to approve this design based on their granted power from these two sections of the Whitmore Lake North Territorial Overlay District and our architectural design and material guidelines in the new ordinance. We're using materials and employing building techniques that I'm familiar with. I manage, I maintain, and I develop this property. I'm proud to be part of this community. I'm proud of my employees. I'm proud of the business that we built, and I'm proud of the services that we're able to offer this community at a fair price. Tonight, I'm asking you to approve these plans as written and grant me relief from the newly adopted facade percentages in support for my current and ongoing business, and support for my request through relief through Section 36-690 and practical difficulties that are unique to my site and nature of business. In that packet also is, it should be one of the last pages of the regular 8.5 by 11. But it'll show between buildings E and F. It'll kind of show you what these long passages are through there. And I've got some examples that I'd like to give you that are, these are examples of things that have happened over the last handful of years, some worse than others, but they all happen on the long side of our buildings, all of these examples. And
Sir, these are customer mishaps with vehicles?
yes, these are some that they let us know about, and then some that were just ours to discover during walkarounds.
Got it.
I had my engineer produce this drawing here as part of our initial concept meetings to kind of maximize what's happening on our property. And you can see up on the front, there's space to build another building that more fits with what we're looking for and more be the face of, I think, what you guys are looking for from the township. And And this is an engineered drawing. The engineer just kept it with drawing it as limited industrial instead of using some of our grace that's given to us with the Whitmore Lake Overlay District as far as setbacks and things like that. But you can see just from this that he has generated 2 more buildings that are just closer up to US 23. That as we continue our expansion. And so part of what we're doing here today is just get clarification moving forward to what to expect when we're budgeting and keeping forward with the vision that we have of developing this property. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I mean, you can be available for questions we may have later. Okay, thank you. Ms. Christian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This project has been before the Planning Commission on numerous occasions, and I have reviewed this also multiple times. The single outstanding issue at this time is building architecture. The critical part about a variance is given based upon the situation that exists at that particular time. A variance granted in 2019 does not necessitate that the site will continue to get variances of the same kind indefinitely. Every single building that comes after the first one is not entitled to a variance. I supported the request for variance when it came in 2019 because the justification was adequate. At this point of time, my review letter is clear that the justification for the deviation is no longer valid for these buildings because they're getting closer to the freeway and closer to Whitmore Lake Road. The applicant is correct. The building is 200 feet. Building G is over 200 feet from the expressway. But what is not mentioned is the property slopes completely down towards the expressway. That building is clear as the light of day. You see it from every angle, even driving at 75 miles an hour. You cannot miss it. With that building already being at 200 feet setback, possibility of 2 additional buildings coming closer to the freeway, the zoning ordinance previously had architectural standards for only one type of building, that was mini warehousing. It was 100% masonry. In our rewrite of the architectural guidelines, we dropped it from 100 to 25%. That was as significant a drop as any architectural guidelines have ever been done. The intent was to support these businesses so that you don't have an entire industrial buildings are larger, so the cost of masonry on a larger facade is not there. And this is not somewhere where customers regularly come like a retail business. So there was reasoning for dropping it to 25%, consistent with the zoning ordinances for all the other municipalities that I provided you a comparison with when we did the architectural elevations. So at this point of time, when it's dropped from 100 to 25, to make a justification that even 25 is too much and 4% and 9% are adequate is not something that I support from a planning standpoint. My letter provides you with a summary of the percentage of brick and masonry on each of these buildings. Building BB, that is closer to Whitmore Lake Road frontage, it's behind existing building B, agreed. But the long sides of the building have a total masonry of 4.5% and 95.5% of metal panels and doors. The short sides of the building have 19% masonry, 81% metal panels and doors, and on the other side, which presumably is visible from northbound Whitmore Lake Road, has got 41.9% masonry and 58.1% metal. Storage building G, that is along US 23 frontage, the long side of the building has got 9.1% masonry with 90.9% metal doors. The short sides of the building have 18.1% masonry and 81.9% metal panel and doors. Now, the climate control warehouse building, it does comply with the ordinance, new ordinance standards for 25% masonry. However, the ordinance limits the amount of metal that can be on the facade, and that can easily be rectified by minor additions to the facade of the warehouse building itself so that it can be fully compliant with the ordinance standards. With regard, the applicant has provided justification that there are people who do not drive carefully when they're driving through the building. So the answer to that is not to eliminate masonry altogether and put metal. The answer is to put bollards painted yellow so that people won't run into the building. Masonry is also a much more durable material than metal. Sheet metal will buckle no matter how thick the gauge of steel is. Masonry will not do that. There are many ways to protect buildings. That is why you see many commercial buildings that do not have a raised sidewalk. They have bumper blocks. They have yellow painted bollards in front so that cars and vehicles don't run into the building. So there are solutions to protect your investment in masonry. Not only is that, this building is also located in the WLNT district. We have not applied any of the overlay district guidelines to this building and this site. We could have, but we did not, because we believe this site was established such a long time ago that it wouldn't be fair to the applicant to retroactively apply all those standards. So we have, if you look at comment number 11 in our review letter, we did not even apply most of the standards except to tell the Planning Commission that look at the current architectural guideline standards and, retroactively do not apply WLNT to this site. At this point of time, I have discussed this multiple times with the applicant, and the last couple of meetings, I really had nothing additional to add besides the analysis that I have already provided. The applicant has maintained their stance from the beginning that this is the building architecture they want to have to match with the existing buildings on the site, which also infers that in the future, when the other buildings are built, they will also not comply with the architectural guidelines, because if you have granted it for 2 buildings now, there is really no reason for you not to grant it for all future buildings. You have no justification to not grant it at that time. So my recommendation to the Planning Commission at this time is to make a determination based upon work that you have put into adopting new architectural guidelines for the township, where you want to see the township and where you want to see the Whitmore Lake Road corridor. Yes, these are established industrial areas. That does not mean they cannot be improved from what they are today. So I defer to the Planning Commission to take whatever decision you think is appropriate.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have some discussions here. Anybody want to start?
if I can just add something really quick. In reference to the 100% masonry, before when we were asking for the variance based, we were asking for partial masonry at that point in time. The numbers are hard to hit. You know, it's true that this is only showing 1% of masonry on this entire wall right there. But the fact is that even if we did, you know, like a wainscot across each of those doors, we would still only hit a 10%. And that's 4 feet up. The door heights are at 7 feet. So if we were to do that 4 feet, that'll get us a 10%. That 7 feet, it's going to still be not hitting. So I feel like it's disingenuous to say how much relief I'm getting from a 100% masonry facade when 64% of this building is doors. And that's kind of how I'm framing it with my, when I broke down my percentages in the blueprints, where because there's so many doors, it's just, there's got to be some type of exception to this, in that no matter what, I mean, I was calling this horizontal ribbed siding, and then the standing seam as a vertical siding are the percentages that I put in there. So it's, like I said, even if we were to go to the percentages that we're talking about on this wall, we're still coming up and doing over top of the header with brick. And we're, you know, so you would almost have to say that this, because there's so many doors, you're pushing me back into 100% masonry. And just looking at this one facade. I just wanted to make that small, short point. And then we are doing some other things around the site in front of the building, the building that we're converting. We are putting in bushes all the way along right there with some tall arborvitaes. In addition to that, we're adding another planting bed over further that way, just to add some trees to the site. And then, you know, as far as not applying, when Ms. Krishna was saying that we weren't applying anything for the Whitmore Lake Overlay District to these plans, of course we are. We have to do that, because to get the conditional use, we're at the Whitmore Lake Overlay District, because I'm zoned limited industrial, and we're not allowed to be a self-storage facility. So I know there's a lot, we're getting pulled in a lot of different directions with the overlay district, with the new rules, things like that. But, I mean, this seems like an honest ask right here, just to continue what we're doing and to stay harmonious with the looks of the buildings. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to make a comment here about this, is that there was a gentleman that has a storage facility up the road here and came through up for a site plan approval, and we held him to certain standards. You're asking us not to hold you to the same standards we held him. That's what you're asking us to do.
Where's the status of that project?
It's on hold right now. He hasn't started it yet.
I thought he put it all on hold at this point. Are they still moving forward with you guys?
That's an irrelevant point. The relevant point is that he got an approval, but we set the standards. And so you're asking us to give you something less than what he has gotten.
Was he building a brand-new building right by the road?
Yep.
Right at the front of the road?
Yeah, he's building another one too, that's off the side of the road. But we were holding him to the same standard. So you gave us this picture that you presented to us, right?
Yeah, that's just a picture of an existing, that was the,
Why can't you make your building like that?
that's what we got, that's what's being proposed.
All of it? Like on one side where you have nothing?
What, no, there's masonry between all of these.
On the sides? How about we're on the long sides?
That's what I'm saying, is alongside, that's what I'm contending for the relief for the general exemption, that with 25 feet between the buildings, I run into a lot of problems with people backing into those areas and things like that. So that's why I'm asking for that type of relief for those things. Where that is,
No, I know that. No, I understand that. I'm saying, why can't you put this?
there's a lot more space between there for people.
I'm just saying, why can't you put this along those areas? You could, right?
Yeah, I could build them all out of brick, I could do them all out of concrete block.
You're asking for something, we're trying to talk about what it is we can end up making suggestions for you. And so I'm asking you, why can't you make it the sides where it's all along like that with this half brick, because that's just a facade, right? You got the piece right there, right? So the brick is actually not individual brick, it's just a facade, right? You don't have somebody laying individual bricks like that, that's one piece.
No, that's all individual pieces of brick.
It's not something that's,
No, in 2019, I got turned down on composite, which I was trying to do, and they said it didn't meet the masonry because it was 100% masonry at that point in time, so I changed it to this.
okay.
So you're saying that currently all your columns between each overhead door is half brick and then half metal
On these,
on the long sides?
no, there's no, just like that picture that Mr. Santalicho was looking at right there was the, just as an example of that's what these three buildings will be identical right here, the triplets I call them. Each one of those will have corners that look like that, and that's the end cap.
So where's the other building then that had the brick, this one? Which building is this?
That's the corner of this building right here.
So
I
to
guess
just,
I'm gonna say
so
what,
just to provide, if I could, the photograph that you're seeing is of the short sides of the building, and the only masonry on the long sides of the building is the wraparound on the two corners. The rest of the full long side is metal. So that's what Mr. Evans is explaining.
is this short? Yeah, I don't know why, I mean, if you're afraid of damage, why wouldn't you put the masonry in between each overhead door?
The other storage facilities that I've visited there that are doing that, the one on South Industrial in Ann Arbor, they did, and they put a yellow stanchion pole in front of each of those. And again, with snow removal, things like that, every one of those poles is another thing to go around.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, if you did brick in between at least halfway up, you wouldn't have to worry about the bollards in front, potentially.
So going with a complete brick structure?
No, I mean brick in between for, just like this picture, but on the long side of your buildings. And that rendering you had behind yeah, that one. So between every overhead door, why couldn't you do a half brick, just like the?
I can, but that's what I was saying, is during those long skinny runs, that's where my customers run into trouble.
Well, it'd probably be easier to let them hit slightly the brick than the metal to tear it apart.
Well, it is, and then in one of those packets, let me get one of those ones. The large picture that you can see in that packet that we gave to you today is the interior. It's kind of strange, but that's the interior of the unit. That's a partition interior. So how I'm equating this is more along the lines of this particular accident was a guy that thought he had it in forward and he was in reverse. And it was a large moving truck and a moving company. But what that ended up doing is damaging that partition wall, the 30-foot partition wall on the inside. Now, if that was masonry and that guy hit that with that big semi-truck, that could have been catastrophic for that whole side of the building right there.
But that's a demising, you're saying, between units?
Yes, that was between the units, but this was the outside damage that did that.
But still, the brick is more of it's not a structural part of this building. It's more of a facade.
It's a veneer, yeah.
Correct. So even if you wiped out all the bricks, the building's not going to fall down, right?
What do you, I don't understand what you're saying. Oh, I think I do.
Hold on.
So
Yeah.
if somebody backs into
If all
that,
this brick came off, that building's not falling down.
no. If they ran
There's
into
steel
that,
underneath it.
yeah, there's steel underneath it all.
So all I'm saying is that you're bringing up suggestions to us that's really none of our concern. That your customers may back into your building, they may back into your fence, they might have problems turning things around. That's really not my concern. Our concern is how is your building going to look compared to what we have set out as architectural standards for everybody to have to apply to. I mean, the fact that your customers bang into your buildings, it's not my problem.
No, I understand that.
So, I mean, you're bringing it up like there's a reason why you're not doing something.
I am. I'm bringing it up because of Section 36690, the general exemptions. The Planning Commission has the authority to waive or modify these guidelines or standards upon the consideration of the following. 2, existing site design, including architecture, parking, driveways, that are placed in a manner in which the application of these standards provided herein are impractical.
So, but but that doesn't make any sense to me either. And the reason is because even if it's steel, you're still going to have people backing into your building. So
But it's a one-piece replacement, though. Instead of, this is colored, it's colored mortar. It has to be done in the warmer weather, whereas these other repairs can be done when they happen. This is a lot of steps. There's a lot of layers to that. There's drainage behind there. There's like 4 layers that go behind the thin brick.
Yeah, true, John.
So it's pretty extensive. It's not, I mean, I would agree with you if I was able to do the composite and move forward with a composite material that looks like brick, that has some longevity, and I can click it back in there. I would perfectly agree. But again, this is where we got pulled into back, and I know it was in 2019, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm here. It's still my property. I'm still trying to move forward with the development of it. And now that that's changed, I'm looking for this relief.
Ms. Chick.
Yep, as one commissioner, listened to your presentation. I appreciate the concerns that you have regarding the types of materials that you have to use, but my concern is for the township, and we do have architectural standards by ordinance that, and we did them so that we could bring the aesthetics of the township, even in the industrial area, and upgrade it and not continue to keep it the way it is, because when someone else comes in, they're going to have to comply as well. So we have an issue with, if we give precedence here, then when you come in for your next 2 buildings, that we have to give you the same kind of consideration, and that's really uncomfortable. I can tell you from 200 feet is nothing. You can see everything at 200 feet, so that, I just don't see any justification for not complying with our ordinance standards.
Mr. Gordon.
I appreciate what Mr. Evans is saying in this sense, that we've established 25% as the minimum we want for masonry, which is a long reach from 100, so that's a big concession. But even when you look at this particular building, which is a storage facility, even if he did the 4 feet of brick between each door, which looks very attractive here, or it looks more attractive, it wouldn't get anywhere near 25%, right?
Extent feasible.
And even if he went to 8 feet, he wouldn't get to the 25%.
Here is the thing. It might not get close to 25%, but it cannot be all or nothing. There has to be an effort to comply with the code to the extent feasible, so that the Planning Commission has got justification in granting that flexibility. Yes, it probably will still only be 12%, even if you do only to that, but that still improves the architectural look of all the buildings and shows that Mr. Evans has made an effort to come up with the ordinance. I don't think any of the Planning Commission said it has to go all the way up to the top of the doors or anything. You're talking about doing it only till 4. You're right, that might still only be 12%, 13%, but it is still 12 or 13%, not 4%.
Okay, so the other question I had was, that orange building is a new one that's going up there, right? And that's going to be visible to the highway, but you're planning on putting another building, or 2 other buildings there, so then it will no longer be visible, or probably not much visible. Does that have any impact on our thinking? I mean, it is a storage facility, and even with the brick, I mean, maybe we can find some middle ground where he can do that panel that he was talking about that's not brick, that's a composite, so that it will have the same visual impact. I'm just trying to find a middle ground here, because it's not like we're putting up the Taj Mahal here. These are storage buildings. I don't expect them to be gorgeous. But that's just my opinion.
Mr. Thomas.
Okay, so I'm going to be at odds with our esteemed chairman. I'm going to be at odds with our esteemed planner. I think the applicant has met us more than halfway. I think it's a little bit unfortunate that in what psychologically what might be going on is that we just passed an ordinance that allows us the flexibility to not adhere to these standards. And now we're getting an applicant who is coming in and at the same time is asking us right out of the gate to do that. And I understand that there can be some, people might have a little bit of distaste for that, because if the argument being that if we do it this time, then we're going to have to do it next time, we're going to have to do it next time. I don't believe that's the case. I think that this is, Mr. Gordon's comment about it being a self-storage facility is very relevant, because this is not a brand-new constructed building in a state where it's going to be the first use for a given piece of property. This is a continuous use. So I recognize I may not have the votes, but I do want to state my position that I think this is a perfect candidate, not perfect, it's a good candidate for us to consider applying the exemption. I'm especially sympathetic to the idea that every time somebody tags one of his buildings, he's not looking at a blank dollar repair, he's looking at a blank plus. And I don't know what the blank plus is, but I suspect that the blank plus is a significant outlay that I'm not sure justifies the township putting its foot down and saying we have to have more brick. That's just my opinion.
So one of the things that I want to, and I respect I respect your opinion. I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just trying to present, these. You can argue. No, these. That's kind of what we do. But it's a discussion. So this building is different than the other ones that were on there. All right. These were put up more recently. Yes. So if we weren't concerned about the aesthetic value, why didn't we at the time then just go along with whatever it looked like back then and not have these additional things on it? And I think the answer to that is that we're trying to improve the looks of these buildings. And if we don't at some point in time decide, well, that one's been up there for a long time, so we're just going to ignore our new standards and let them put up what was there before, we're not really trying to, in my opinion, trying to improve what our intended purpose was of the ordinance and spending the time to get to that point. I personally would end up favoring giving him the exception to the rule of doing a 4-foot thing, which would, I think, would bring into an aesthetic value that we're trying to get to, but not burden him with a 25% of covering the whole thing. And that's why I was bringing this up early. I think this is a much more aesthetic value. And each time, if we can get some improvement out of when somebody wants to improve their property, that's not only improvement for our township, it's an improvement for their property. Okay. So that's why I'm in favor of using the carve-out that we have to reduce the amount down to get us something that I think should look like that. That's the thing. So I understand 25% is not practical in this situation because of the doors and everything else like that. I accept that. But I still think we can end up having them have holding a different standard, and that's what I think that we should do.
Mr. Thomas?
Yep.
Just a minor clarification. My comments and recommendation on the architecture of this building predate even the discussion at the Planning Commission regarding the architectural guidelines. That was this year. I started this discussion in early last year before architectural guidelines were even on the horizon. So this is not a knee-jerk reaction to saying we have a new ordinance in place. And most definitely, complying with 25% might be challenging. I completely agree. The reason I concur with what Chairman Stanleger is saying is there has to be an effort to upgrade. I understand what you're saying about the use of the site. This is not exactly a coffee shop or a drive-through where people constantly go to same shop. But you do need to remember, the site has got very high visibility on US 23. Whether it is used by people or not, it does have architectural visibility. And when we hold on to the architectural guidelines for some of our buildings that are on the back of Beyond in Joma Drive, where nobody is ever going to see except the employee who's going to the building, we are going to be enforcing the rules to a T. So just want to make sure that when the Planning Commission looks at ordinances, please look at the ordinances as a whole. Do not look at it as an individual development or not, because whether you use the words, this does not set a precedent, it really means nothing if your actions set a precedent, if that makes sense. So
2 points I want to bring out too is that they went before the ZBA for a variance for this, and they were denied, which means that the ZBA looked at this and decided that they weren't going to grant a variance for the architectural standards. Is that right, Mr.
Mr. Chair,
Zarzaki?
wasn't the variance, wasn't the ZBA, didn't the ZBA table this because the new
The
standards?
ZBA in the end did deny the variance for 100% masonry,
Right.
because at that point, we already had a new ordinance. So we could not give a variance on an old ordinance that didn't exist anymore, technically, because we had a new ordinance in operation at that point.
So the ZBA proceeding was moot, basically. It was, the 100% was so far off the table that there was, a denial was meaningless.
Right.
Hold on.
If I can just,
Hold on 1 second. The other point that I was going to bring up, and I just, conversation it went in and out, so I'll think about it in a second. Go ahead.
I've had 2 meetings in reference to this project at the ZBA. The first one, it did get tabled because it was so close to that other ordinance, possibly coming in. They were still working it out and things, and so it was tabled at that point in time. My presentation was probably pretty weak at that time also, and so they tabled it. The second time I did get before them, again, at that point in time, our plans had not been updated with the percentages of the facades. And, you know, they were ready to table it at that point, but I really felt that they had the power to still grant me the variance at that point in time. But upon realization, it all came back to you guys for modification now.
All right, so I know what I was going to say. One of the reasons that when we were working through the architectural standards, is we wanted to have the ability at the Planning Commission to, make some exceptions, rather than sending a person through the ZBA for some of these things. So that's one of the important things we added into that section that Ms. Christian didn't have in there at first. We wanted to have the exception, the ability to actually do what we're talking about. So that's why going through, looking at this, for me personally, I think this is a reasonable compromise to what it is that our standards are listed as. And that's why I was bringing that up as a topic of discussion. I think it turns out to be a better aesthetics for the building, and I think that meets the standard we're trying to do for our architectural standards.
So are you
Ms. Grana.
proposing, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
on the 2 faces, 2 facades, that one faces the freeway, one faces Whitmore, are those the only 2 facades?
You have to speak closer.
Are those the only 2 facades that you're thinking need to have the brick wainscot? Or do you want it on on the long sides, but on the bottom of the orange and the top of the orange?
Well, I mean, I was thinking it should end up being on the whole building, but I would be open to a compromise on that.
It's already on the sides, on the short sides, I see, per your renderings. But what I was asking, if it doesn't, as a compromise possibly, between the buildings, the other face.
I think that's a reasonable compromise. It would address Mr. Evans' concern that between the buildings, it can be an issue. So if it is on the outside, north side of building
Visible,
G facing the freeway, only there you don't have it in the narrow aisle between. Those can remain metal as it is. and you can have it on the Whitmore Lake Road facade because that is the one visible. So the interior hidden sides, if the planning commission is okay with it,
So
that
just to
would,
be clear, I'm sorry, just Whitmore Lake view would have the long and the two shorts.
Correct.
The brick, and on the 23 side, it would be the long and the two shorts, but not the one
Correct.
inner side.
correct, that's what. Mr. Chair, if I might just add one clarification on the record. The ZBA action was not moot. The reason the ZBA denied it a second time was because Member Olney had asked, okay, you're not meeting 100% masonry requirement. What percentage requirement are you meeting? The ZBA did not have percentages in front of them, nor did they have any means of doing calculations, because that data was provided to the Planning Commission, not to the ZBA. So the ZBA said we cannot grant a variance when we don't know what we are granting a variance for. The ZBA's role is very narrow, right? You have to say, I'm granting a setback variance of 3 feet 2 inches, or I'm granting you a masonry variance of 15.2%. The ZBA said we have no percentage in front of us, so we don't know what to grant you, so we are going to deny it so that you work it out with the Planning Commission, because the Planning Commission will now have the ability to work with you. So the ZBA decided the Planning Commission would be the right body, so that was one of the reasons for them to deny it, not because they were not receptive to discussing it with Mr. Evans. They just didn't know what number are we throwing out there.
I have a question for the applicant. What is this a picture of? This is 23 looking at your facility?
Yes, that one was just in reference to how much of the facade you can see on the building that we're trying to convert to climate control. And then I had let me grab it. Oh, it's right here. If we were worrying about the percentages on that one,
My question really was, if all those trailers and other vehicles are going to be parked there, you all, if you're talking about attractive from the highway, you can't even hardly see the building. All you see is a bunch of vehicles parked there.
correct.
So the other question was, on the new one that you're putting up that's visible from the highway, you weren't planning on having any doors on the highway side, right? Because the doors, are these buildings accessed for storage from both sides?
For the two new self-storage buildings?
Yeah.
Yes, they're accessed on both sides.
Okay, so they're big enough, wide enough that you have bays along both long sides?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Correct, yeah.
Thanks, yeah,
Yeah, we did draw up all the sides of the buildings on this one here.
all right. Can you drive through from one side to the other, or there's a wall between?
On some of our older buildings, we do. We
Yeah.
did convert them for vehicle storage and things, and that's kind of why on the front page of our prints, we do a parking count, and sometimes my unit count changes a little bit.
Okay.
Because sometimes I'll divide those into a 10 by 15 and a 5 by 10, because there's flexibility. It's a kit.
The other two questions I had was, you have drawings here showing your lighting plan. There's some buildings along that stretch when I'm driving home at night sometimes, going south on Whitmore Lake Road, where the security lights are blaring right into my eyes, going south and north, which I would think violates our township downshielded light ordinance, dark skies ordinance. Yours is downshielded, all the lighting that you're putting in is going to be downshielded?
Yeah, but I believe if memory serves me right, I believe there's two options, I forget what they call them, like a full throw. I forget what the words are, but there was two options of a shading, and I did one that projected just a little bit more forward. There is some trajectory shading on it, but there is another option to add another hood. Reason being, I could see adding them on there would make a good point, because when there's two buildings face to face with each other, we stagger the lighting so that we can kind of shine into the unit across from it. But the buildings that you're talking about are older ones, there's no buildings adjacent to them. So I could look into getting some shades and doing like a more of a tip down on those lights.
Thank you. And I don't know if you have deer issues, but arborvitae are sugar cane, for deer, so just a word of warning.
What was it?
The arborvitaes the deer love them.
We've had a couple get inside the gates, and it's quite exciting trying to get them out.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any other discussions here? So would would we be open to having this type of 4-foot on the sides that face the outer portions of the road? Yeah, the three sides, 2 short sides and 1 long side that's visible, and leave the inside portion as he has presented here. That'd be a compromise we could do? All right. I don't know what percentage that would end up being, but that would end up being,
No, I think if your motion is clear saying that you are requiring masonry to be added to a height of 4 feet on the west side of Building G facing US 23, and on the, the east side of Building G facing US 23, and the west side of Building BB facing Whitmore Lake Road. That's BB, correct? Yeah.
Right, yes.
Those are the only 2 sites with the wraparounds on the side as already proposed by the applicant. If you put that in your motion, that's something the building official will be able to check properly when it is so.
Because his percentage will never meet. It's just inherent in the design and so we should even discuss the percentage on this. So it's just the aesthetics is.
Yes, it's most definitely nowhere close to 25%, but
It never will, but.
your flexibility would probably be based on the fact that it meets the intent of what you're trying to accomplish through the architectural guidelines that, yes, the site is old, but just because it's old doesn't mean it should not look better. And Mr. Evans is successful, and hopefully he'll continue to be more successful, so all the more reason to make the buildings look nice.
I've also enjoyed driving by and seeing some of the new plantings you've done on the Whitmore Lake side, because I think in terms of beautifying a storage facility, landscaping can go a long way toward masking it and breaking up the long line of a building that even with the brick is still quite monotonous, because it is what it is. So I'm a big proponent of landscaping.
It's kind of a tough with landscaping there, again, just because of the nature of the business, is trees that are like closer to the buildings, like the one that's being proposed for that climate control conversion and at the end of our carport. The tighter to it, and then again, some spacing. We need visibility here. We do need, not just for customers to see what we're going to do and stuff like that, but there's, we've had a couple of break-ins, things like that, a couple of catalytic converter roundups, some, during COVID, someone came through with a jack and started jacking up the center of a bunch of our doors. They caught those people. But what we've been trying to do is remove a lot of foliage up towards the expressway. I know sometimes our officers will sit on the roundabouts a little bit, kind of watching the expressway a little bit. So I did remove a lot of trees so they can catch some more visibility into our property, hopefully to see some flashlights or something. In addition to that, I did give them a code that they're able to patrol through the property overnight, and I do see that they come through on the gate, which I really appreciate. But again, I know it seems like I'm trying to be so difficult with all these things. It's just, I know this stuff. I've been here since 2006, dealing with a lot of things here. And there's some places that we can plant trees and it'll be great. There's other places where I need visibility. I need eyes on my site from far away. And they see a flashlight going around.
Well, this has nothing to do, I'm assuming you have an alarm system or some kind of...
We did. We added 3 new DVR systems planted at different places on our property. They all tie into one on my phone, but 3 different locations just to get some redundancy. Again, we're always looking for that. The 2 gates in case one goes down. Each of our climate control buildings has multiple furnaces in case one goes down. Things like that, because it happens. So. I'm willing to do these things again, and I believe what you guys are saying right now is I can understand a little bit the expressway portion of things because people can see that. But again, with this building BB, this facade here, you can see none of it. You can see none of it unless you're on site. So again, I understand the whole idea of here because we can see these ones immediately next to the expressway. That I've got that whole row cleared for this building right now. All the RVs that are usually parked there, there's usually 12 of them. Those are all gone right now in preparation for this project, so we can really, really get visuals through there right now. But again, this building BB is again, just kind of a weird little guy because he's tucked way behind this 250-foot building. Even a visual from the expressway, this building actually sticks 5 feet past this guy because it's got a little division between, there's a 5-foot space between these two buildings. So again, I don't see it as relief because I still think it's a hardship going down between those long side of the buildings just because of what we've run into with customers. But again, I could see a decent compromise as maybe doing the face of that at the 4 feet level because you can see it from the expressway till I get my next construction project done. And then maybe just sticking with the end caps for each of these guys. Because even if we did that 4 foot, again, we're only coming up to 10%. So that 25%, there's a difference between 1% and 10%. I appreciate that. I know that. But the hardship that's involved with putting those things down there, I just wish I could convey to you guys exactly what I'm trying to say.
I just had a question. I thought when you went through the ordinance, it said that if it was visible to the road, and if that BB building isn't really visible to the road, I don't really know why we need to put up the 4 foot. I mean, it's an interior passageway, right? And you don't see it from Whitmore Lake Road.
So the existing building that is right up front with Whitmore Lake Road, it is a really old building. Wasn't that one of the original buildings built on the site, correct?
Yeah, from the late 80s, I believe.
Yeah. So if that building is ever remote, now you have, sites do upgrade. Now you have something, and it's not very far from Whitmore Lake Road, that front facade too. It is not too far. So site conditions don't always remain the same. So you have got to anticipate for that also. And since the distance from that building facade to Whitmore Lake Road is not significantly far, that's why a recommendation was, okay, if it's a compromise, that facade can be, as recommended, up to a height of 4 feet. But I think at this point, I pretty much said everything I have to. It's up to the plan.
And the building B that's in front of BB, it'll get facelifted before we ever ask customers to move out because once they start moving all their stuff to a new building for us to rebuild that one, they're not going to come back. So again, we would be doing that facing while those buildings were occupied. We're not going to tear it down.
All right. Done? All right. All right, so I will make the motion to approve with conditions the site plan for absolute storage, which is at 6684 Whitmore Lake Road, parcel B0220300018, which is case JPC 23006. The conditions being those listed in the McKenna report dated May 22nd, 2025. The December 1st letter from the Northfield Township Fire Department dated December 1st, 2023. The OHM report dated November 17th, 2023. All those conditions in there as long as they're met, along with the condition that there be 4 foot of masonry on the east side of Building G and the west side of Building BB between the doors on the long side there, along with the ends of the units as presented by the applicant.
I'll support.
Motion by Stanilecho, support by Chick. Is there any discussion on that? Mr. Thomas, you want to do a roll call on that one? Sure.
Ms. Chick?
Yes.
Ms. Ganem? Yes. Mr. Zarzaki?
Yes.
Mr. Stanilecho?
Yes.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas votes yes.
Okay. The motion passes 6-0. We're going to move on to unfinished business, B, which is a recommendation to the Township Board of Trustees for the approval of changes or obviously denial of the amendment to the Northfield Township zoning ordinance, Section 36-672, Section 36-836, and Section 36-866. So I'm going to make the motion to accept the amendment to the, make a recommendation to the Township Board to approve the amendments to the Northfield Township zoning ordinances, Section 36-672, Sections 36-836, and Sections 36-866 as presented.
Mr. Chair. Go ahead.
Yeah, all right.
I just had a couple housekeeping things.
Hold on. Let me just
Okay,
make the
go ahead.
motion. So the motion by Stanalecho and support by Chick. Go ahead. Thank you.
Under Section 2, 36-836, the first sentence there, I was kind of confused because there's a comma after from.
I can remove it.
Yeah, that, if that's what gone, then it makes more sense.
Must have been a typo.
Okay. Section 3, the first sentence isn't a sentence. It's a clause. I think it'd be improved if you said, an informal meeting will be held with the township planning consultant, because otherwise,
Okay, you want to clarify, okay.
Yeah.
Informal meeting.
same thing with item B on the back of the page.
Correct.
Those first two sentences are not sentences, they're clauses. If you put at the very beginning, a formal meeting shall be held with the township planning consultant, then it makes it into a sentence. And
Clarification, Mr. Gordon,
Yeah.
in both cases, it's an informal meeting and a formal meeting may be held. It is always an
okay,
applicant's option.
may be held, okay,
We don't force them to have a meeting.
all right, thank you. Well, you know, if you're, this is the law, you know? I agree.
He
You
likes
want it
the
to be
gray
a-
areas.
You kind of want it to be understandable. And the second sentence that starts projects requiring site plan review might start with applicants with projects requiring,
Where are you, Mr. Gordon?
does that make sense?
Where are you exactly? In
Okay, I'm still on item B.
Okay,
It's the second sentence that starts projects requiring site plan review. Either, again, it's a clause, but if you had applicants with projects requiring site plan review, may schedule, because projects don't schedule anything. Applicants schedule things, right?
okay.
That's the best one he's come up with.
Going back to English school.
On item,
I thought I was doing good, but
now,
okay,
the
after
item
that,
C,
I will.
item C doesn't really need to be changed much, but the last sentence, it says, "At this time, all applicable fees shall be paid." I guess that's fine, at this time, at that time, either way. And then in section 4 below that, the second paragraph, there's a period after the word inconsistency, and then the next sentence starts, provided, comma, however. I think it'd be much better if you just put a comma after inconsistency, and then it all becomes one sentence, and it makes more sense that way. And then just a question on the Section 5 effective date. When we put something into a newspaper of general circulation within the township, what newspaper is that? It's the Ann Arbor News. Okay, thanks. That's all I had, was just those couple of minor correct housekeeping.
Thank you.
I don't see anywhere in the ordinance that it calls out the zoning administrator attend, or is he part of the staff or officials?
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
I think that was discussed at the last meeting because zoning administrators can change, but you wanted to make sure that the planning consultant was involved because the planning consultant will be the one reviewing the plan If
Right.
not us, somebody else, but the zoning administrator might also end up being some other township staff member, which might not provide the full picture.
Thank you.
I think it also ends up allowing for the township manager to be included, but it doesn't have to specify that, so.
Yeah.
All right. So with all those corrections,
I will make them before it goes to the Board of
okay.
Trustees.
All right, very good. Any other discussions? All right. All right, those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, the motion carries 6-0. Thank you. New business, and that's consideration of the site plan, final site plan approval for the Groves of Whitmore Lake, case JPC 230010, Detroit Riverside Capital and Shostak Brothers and Company on behalf of Gold Corridor 23 LLC located on 65.46 acres, parcel B0220400003 on the south side of East North Territorial Road, east of US 23 interchange. And that is to approve or approve with conditions or deny. Yep, Ms. Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you recollect this project, it appeared before you a few times before the Planning Commission granted preliminary site plan approval on January 29th, subject to conditions, and you also made a recommendation for the conditional land use to go before the Board of Trustees. Subsequently, the Board of Trustees on March 25th approved the conditional land use, reiterated the conditions of the Planning Commission, and added a couple of conditions in. We have reviewed it for compliance with all of the Planning Commission's conditions and all of the Board of Trustees' conditions and any other items that we believe are necessary before final approval is granted. So one of the conditions was completion of a tree survey and approval of a variance from the ZBA for trees. And the applicant did appear before the ZBA on April 21st and was granted a variance to plant 111 replacement trees instead of 1,290 replacement trees, subject to the payment of a $20,000 contribution to the township's tree fund in lieu of another 50 replacement trees, and preservation of a 5,000-plus tree wooded tract on the southern half of a site within a permanent conservation easement to protect the trees in perpetuity. Those were the conditions imposed by the Zoning Board of Appeals, which the applicant agreed to in writing. There was some minor discrepancy in the square footage of the commercial building on a few notes, which was corrected. The dumpsters on the site have been revised to comply with the new dumpster ordinance design standards that the township adopted. The colors were not noted, just want to be sure that the colors are consistent with the building colors itself, so it melts with the site. When they appeared before you for preliminary hearing, the attorney for the property to the east, Nova, was over here concerned about security and other stuff. It was something that the Planning Commission made a motion saying they either install a fence or work it out with the neighbor, because it's more of a civil matter, because the applicant was complying with the letter of our ordinance, work it out to the satisfaction of both parties and Eagle, because there are a whole bunch of wetlands along that too. Since then, the applicant has met with the neighbor, and there is a letter from the neighbor's attorney, the gentleman who was here at the last meeting, stating that they accept the proposed landscape buffer and improvements as shown on the site plan. So they resolved whatever issues the neighbor had. The applicant needs to get approval from the engineer, Washtenaw County, and all of the agencies before building permits are issued, which they are aware of, and they will be working through that. The Planning Commission had asked for a detailed hydrology report on the site because there was some question about groundwater aquifers. So the applicant did provide hydrology information from the site. This is included within a detailed aquifer test review that was done by Eagle. The letter is dated February 1st of 2024, and Eagle basically asked them to drill 3 wells on there. 1 was a test well, and 2 are the monitoring wells. All 3 wells were drilled to a depth of 190 feet. The reason why they have 2 wells is because they have to provide redundancy in the well so that in case one well goes off. But between the 2 wells, they have a maximum pumping capacity of 600 gallons per minute. That is the maximum capacity they are allowed to draw. In addition to these conditions of the Planning Commission, the Township Board once again said that they need to get a variance for the trees, which they did. Installation of decorative fencing around the retention pond for safety, as was recommended by Planning Commission. There is a retention pond, 2 retention ponds right behind the commercial development. Per Washtenaw County, apparently the design of the ponds was adequate to not require a fence. However, these are retention. As such, at some point of time, they're going to hold water in a heavy storm event, and that's always an attractive nuisance where there are little kids. So the Planning Commission required that there be fence and made a recommendation that it must be a decorative fence. So the applicant is installing painted aluminum decorative fence around both retaining ponds, not chain link fence. Once again, working with the adjacent property owner, which they did. The biggest thing about this was conservation easement and the tree fund. So the tree fund establishment is still being worked on by the township attorney. The final details are being finalized, and the applicant has given an agreement that they will deposit the $20,000 into the tree fund, working with the township attorney when the whole setup of the tree fund is adequately determined. The second thing was placement of a conservation easement on the 5,000 plus tree tract. Now, the applicant was asked to submit a draft conservation easement agreement, which they did. It is under review by the township attorney. I did discuss it with the township attorney. One of the clauses, if you look at your site plan, even when it came before you for preliminary, there is a trail going through the wooded area as part of the recreational amenities for the residents of the development. At the time, we thought it was a good idea. But when you look at it in the long-term preservation, the whole point of conserving it is to keep it in its natural state. So the applicant's conservation easement notes, grantor shall refrain from altering or developing or permitting others to alter or develop the easement area in any manner except for walking paths, recreational amenities such as trash, benches, cans, gazebo, utilities and the related structures as permitted by the grantee. The plan does show a wooden boardwalk and trail through the wooded area. At this time, we would like to recommend that the Planning Commission eliminate any kind of human intrusion into the conservation area. It might just be a walking trail. Soon it'll become wider for a bike. And then, you know, when there is a trail, people will use it for whatever it is. And then the applicant will have to go in there and start maintaining invasive species. If the intent of the Planning Commission was to keep that area intact in perpetuity for wildlife and the way, maybe the best thing to do is to just eliminate any kind of human intrusion into it. So if the Planning Commission is supportive of it, I would like to recommend that you make a condition that the conservation easement remain untouched. No intrusion to remove any species, let it remain as nature intended it to be. So that's one of the recommendations I have at this time. So since the original inception of this project, I believe it's been over 2.5 years. The applicant has met with the township numerous times, worked through all of the issues related to public utilities, stormwater detention, wetlands, and trees, and they have pretty much done what was asked of them at every stage of the development. So at this time, it is our recommendation that the Planning Commission grant the Groves of Whitmore Lake final site plan approval, subject to the Planning Commission's decision on either incorporating trails and improvements to the area with the conservation easement or maintaining it as it stands today, natural. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions? Let's check.
I have a question, but I agree with keeping the conservation easement in a natural state. Otherwise, you're actually turning it into a park preserve, and that was not the intention. So I agree with that recommendation.
Mr. Thomas.
So I know this is going to get caught, but the draft conservation easement has what we call a selection of venue clause, and it says that venue's proper with the circuit court for the county of Livingston, and that's probably not right.
No.
And it also says or the federal district court for the Eastern District in Michigan. U.S. District Court would be shocked to think that anybody thought that it had venue over a conservation easement. It just doesn't. So again, I know it's going to get caught, but I'm just, for the record, I want to point out that that's got to get changed.
Yes. The township attorney will be reviewing the document and finalizing it, and the conservation easement needs to be executed, as is the payment into the tree fund before any building permits are issued for the site. The one thing the attorney did request me to bring up tonight is to have them include a clause in the conservation easement to allow the township the ability to annually inspect the conservation easement area to ensure that it's being maintained in its natural state, and nothing has been done. So to give us the right township to actually check once a year to make sure that nobody has gone in there and done anything, so.
Yes, Ms. Gannon.
Just one question. Maybe I wasn't here yet. Is there a physical sample of all the finishes for the exteriors?
Yes.
And is it on site here? Did we maintain that sample?
No, I think we returned it to the applicant. They brought it to the meetings, and they put in the sample details, the specifications,
Okay.
and the colors in the sheets.
I saw the printed ones, but
Yeah.
I knew I would probably have missed it, so that's, okay.
Yeah, they did bring it in
Okay.
initially. We didn't ask them to, sorry, should have.
Oh, perfect.
So I read your recommendations, and I was reading it, and when I was reading it, I highlighted it because I disagreed with it.
Okay.
The walking trails, I wouldn't have any problems with this. I like the ones over in Dexter. There's a lot of elevated walking areas. You can walk through some of the undeveloped areas. Some of them, they actually have where people ride bikes across it and stuff. And so at first I was like, I actually like the idea of people having interactions with a natural environment like that, as long as there's not a promotion of sitting around in benches or
Yeah.
hanging out where people can be, throwing trash and stuff around because it adds into a cleanup. However, in listening to this property is only for the use of the people that actually are living in the groves. It's not an open public area for the public to be, using. And I think that perhaps if we, in talking here and listening, if we had them put something like that, that may end up drawing people to actually want to go there and utilize that, which I think would interfere with, the intent of it being for the, long-term, no development, and not drawing people to it.
Yep.
So that's why at first I disagreed with you, but I do understand the reason to not put anything in there and just leave it as its natural state. So.
When I made my original recommendation, I thought it would be a great idea to have trails because I go hiking really often. I thought, what a great idea. But then I thought, okay, is it just, when I saw gazebos, and then I said, even if we take those out, what happens when people start bringing like maybe a dirt bike in winter, and soon they will invariably end up clearing the track wider than it was ever intended originally. And now it's very difficult to make the vegetation grow back once you start invading into that. And then they'll have to make sure the pathways are maintained by clearing out native species and invasive species. So it would defeat the purpose of not touching any of it.
It would make it more costly for you in the long run because you'd have to maintain all the stuff that is encouraging people to walk through there. So I agree with that recommendation. Then. Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I appreciate it. Well, for the record, Michael Wayne with Detroit Riverside Capital. It's good to be with you all tonight, and thank you for your attention to our project. I appreciate the comments and the suggestions, and while I absolutely respect Ms. Krishnan's and the attorney's recommendation, we are adamantly opposed to this idea. In order to explain that, I really just want to rewind to kind of how we got here. We didn't come in here proposing a conservation easement on the southern portion of our property. We came in proposing an amenity to the development, which was 20 acres of nature trails. The sole purpose of that 20 acres, and frankly the very reason that we weren't proposing any development on that portion of our site, was solely to retain that naturist amenity. And in the process of that discussion about that amenity, the Planning Commission had concern about the longevity of that amenity staying intact. And were we simply going to build it in our first phase and then come in and seek to build a second phase on that property later? That was the concern. And that was why the recommendation was made to us to consider proposing a permanent conservation easement. And the only way that we were able to justify doing that was based on the fact that this naturist area would serve as a wonderful aesthetic and natural area for the community in perpetuity. But what good is any of that area if it can't be enjoyed by the people that live by it? We've always envisioned this property to be sort of a rural, naturist alternative for this vicinity, this county, if you will. You know, a lot of the other housing options that will be of similar quality to this are much more urban and dense areas. And so this particular housing option is of high quality, but in a more rural area. And so one of the ways we wanted to emulate that concept was through this nature area. So while I agree it's critical that this path stays maintained, we're fully willing to do that. I can even concede on things like gazebos because frankly, that's not really creating the essence of the purpose of why that area is there. Happy to agree to not propose or provide any gazebos. As far as park benches go, I mean, frankly, I'd ask like what sort of destruction those do to the environment. I mean, they're about this big, so I'd love to be able to include a couple of benches along the path so people can take a rest. You know, it is quite a long path, but we are very, very adamant about being able to bring this amenity to the project. So I just wanted to share that with you all. And as I said, we're happy to commit to a consistent maintenance routine to ensure that it's free of trash, and happy to commit to those consistent inspections to ensure that everything is maintained. I can even add too, I mean, I've been back there, you know, the tree cover is thick as a canopy, but as far as the mature trees are concerned, they're quite spread apart. And we're likely going to be able to create this path through that area without removing a single tree that's greater than, say, 6-inch DBH.
So let me ask you a question. Are you talking about an elevated path through there because there's wetlands, right?
No, so no wetland, well, I'm sorry, there's a tiny wetland that's 0.2 acres that's like in the very back area. So certainly we'll stay out of that. It's non-regulated anyways.
So what kind of path are you proposing?
I'm sorry. Let me clarify. So there is a regulated wetland that runs all the way across the site. That one, we would create the suspended bridge over, and we would permit that with Eagle. It's a reasonable request to Eagle. They will approve that. We'll have to comply with some requirements, but they will allow for that. Within, we'll call it across that wetland on the southern portion of the land that we're conserving, that would not be a suspended path. That would simply be a dirt or gravel or frankly, we're open to a material suggestion if you'd like, but one of those two, not paved, not concrete. I mean, it's supposed to be a naturist rural environment, and that's the way we would intend to create the path.
So you do understand, though, as I said, that you may be attracting people that live outside your community that by putting in something like this. I mean, you do understand that if word gets out that there's this nice back area you can walk through, I mean, how are you going to manage that, or are you going to have an issue with that?
It's a reasonable concern. I mean, if you rewind all the way back to one of our first meetings, we were initially considering creating this to be a public amenity. I think in practice, Ms. Thomas came up with some reasonable concerns about some legal issues, and I think that was maybe a little bit too hopeful that we'd be able to do that. So we don't intend to do that any longer for safety and legal concerns, but as far as ensuring that we prevent trespassers, as it would be called in that case, you know, we will have an extensive security camera system throughout the property on the exterior of the buildings. We'll place no trespassing signs. And so, and we'll also ensure or mandate through our policy that the nature trail closes at dusk. So no persons would be allowed on the path, you know, after sunset, just as again, a means of safety.
Okay. All right. I don't have any problem. I said, you heard what I just said. That I thought it was a great idea, and then the more I was listening, the more I thought there was a negative thing. And so I didn't know this was something that you actually was asking to have done. So
I was under the impression that this was something we had asked you to do, did not realize that you were so vested in actually putting it through there. So as Chairman Stanley just said, it's not just people from outside coming in. You need to be prepared that outside people will come and park in your apartment complex wherever they find a parking space, and you're just going to have to work that out with your tenants. If it becomes a nuisance, that's not something the township can control. That said, as long as it's still only a path that is wood chips or dirt, it should be okay. But, I mean, even if you're putting benches, it's like in the national parks, you have built of fallen trees and logs, those kind of benches, not a metal bench or something in this. If keeping it as natural as nature intended it to be, maybe benches like that, but no gazebos or trash cans. It's not for people to hang out in. It's for them to go walk, and if they're tired, sit down and just continue and finish their walk, so.
All right. So, I mean, on this draft, then, it says, "and utilities and the related structures." So, I mean, obviously, you're not running electrical lines out there, are you?
No, and frankly, that was drafted by our attorney, and
All right, okay.
it was a boilerplate document. so,
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't see, we don't intend to have any utilities back there.
All right. So how do we clarify this then, in this, as a, how do we clarify this so that the intent is what it is we want to get across and something that's going to fit in with what they want? Yeah, Mr. Gordon?
I don't really know the nature site here. I haven't walked it myself. I have no idea whether this path makes any sense or, I mean, I maintain a path on a 100-acre farm where I live. It's not on my property, but it's a lot of work, and it's wood chips, and they need to be replaced in the wet areas. I mean, the reason this is wooded right now is because it's a wetland, and it couldn't be easily drained for farming. That's why we have most of the woods that we have in our community, is because they're wet. So I would like to have somebody from, Nature Conservancy or something walk the property and see if this path, how disruptive it might be to the property. That's one idea. The other idea is you've got a wooden bridge apparently over the wetlands. They wear out. I mean, I'm quite well aware of how many years. It's 20 years, and it's no longer. It's got to be replaced. So who's going to do that maintenance?
Well,
Is that
they
gonna-
are. They're going to have to maintain the whole thing.
Okay.
It's not going to be our township's responsibility.
Right. So those are two recommendations I had in terms of the path.
Sure. A suggestion for kind of clarifying the intent and what we're committing to might be to call it a 5-foot wide seasonal path. We're not going to snowplow this thing. This isn't open in the wintertime. So I think that's a width that we think makes sense. And again, our intention would be to create that trail without removing any trees in its way. So.
Would maintenance be included in the association fees?
Yes, it will be a for-rent community, so we don't have typical home association fees, but yes, the community itself would pay for the maintenance costs.
So that was the other question. There's 328 apartments here. Nobody's buying anything. They're all rental units, right?
That's correct.
Okay, because language is something that I'm a big fan of, and I think it's so interesting that apartment buildings have now become multi-family residences. They're apartments.
That is a zoning terminology, multiple family. We don't call them apartments in zoning. We do call them multiple family residences.
Why?
Because that's the zoning law, and that's what we've been following.
Yeah.
If you would like me to suggest some language that you can put in your recommendation to clarify your view, I'm happy to suggest something, and you can discard it or you can fine-tune it as you would like it.
Okay.
So your motion to approve can be subject to the execution of a conservation easement on the southern portion of the property as delineated on the site plan and approved by the ZBA.
Too fast, hold on.
Oh, sorry, you're writing?
Can't write that fast. Yeah, I'm like, I want to at least be able to read what I'm writing. Subject to a conservation easement.
On the southern half of the property as shown on the site plan and documentation presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals, ZBA. With the condition that the area shall have only a 5-foot wide wood chip or dirt surface, wood chip, dirt, or natural surface, seasonal trail. With only benches and no other structures or other forms of intrusion. The trail will be maintained by the property owner and is subject to annual inspection by the township. Please feel free to edit it, tweak it.
So for the benches, placement's going to depend on the type of soil or ground, right? So I would think you couldn't have like an iron bench unless you put a cement pad down. We don't want a cement pad down in there, so do we have to specify either?
If you like, you could put in any benches constructed should be of a natural material on, I'm sure they wouldn't want to put it where somebody can sink into the ground and they get the liability. That would be liability, so. If you could, Mr.
I would think rather than concrete, they might end up putting down some stone, some natural stone or something. That would end up,
Stabilize it.
at least giving something like that.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
I have
Yes.
a friendly amendment to.
Feel free, I'm just still writing, so go ahead.
So don't call it a conservation easement.
Okay?
Call it an appropriate agreement between the township and the property owner.
What, an appropriate agreement?
An appropriate agreement. If they want to call it a conservation agreement, that's fine, but conservation easements have a very specific legal meaning, and we don't want to obligate them to create something that really what we're doing now is not a true conservation easement.
I think, Mr. Thomas, when the Planning Commission and the ZBA previously used the term conservation, what they meant was you wouldn't be cutting down any trees in that area or developing it. So
Sure.
if that would be a legally not sound ground, then definitely the township attorney can, yeah.
So, subject to an appropriate agreement between the applicant and the township. Better?
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other discussions? Yes, sir. Mr. Zarzaki.
On your sheet A 3.1, you are showing your water treatment structure, which is all metal siding. We just went through this instance with the,
Mr. Ozeki, if this was going to be an occupied building, it certainly wouldn't be metal siding. I'd just encourage you to look at the tree survey, and you'll see that that building is essentially buried behind a lot of trees and is not going to be very visible. So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Krishna.
I just wanted to clarify that we did see this was a metal building, and the reason for not enforcing it, the application for this project was over 2 years ago. It wasn't in the process when we were reviewing our new architectural guidelines. So legally, we were not allowed to retroactively apply it. They were not still without any approvals. They had already gone past the first approval stage. So we got them to do the dumpster because,
You're welcome. Happy to do that.
and the sign.
agree that it's going to be hidden enough, I hope. And we'll leave it at that, even though your maintenance building does show at least a concrete wainscot at the bottom, so I would have thought you would have had a wainscot on your treatment building as well,
Okay.
at any rate.
Mr. Chair.
from an engineering standpoint.
Mr. Gordon.
I just had a comment to make. I'm going to be voting against this because I don't think that this fits the master plan. I don't think it fits the intent of this intersection. There's been many meetings where I've made this same point over and over again. I appreciate the fact that the wetland is being undisturbed or somewhat undisturbed and not being cut down and replaced. I certainly feel that the buildings here are much more attractive than what we see at Chestnut, so that's a major improvement. But I think what we're putting in here is something that the residents are not all excited about. And when you take this project in conjunction with what Chestnut is doing and Robertson's doing, you are eating up almost all the capacity of the wastewater treatment plant and putting the township future behind the 8 ball. And I don't think that this is smart. So I will be voting against this for that reason, for those reasons.
Any other comments, questions? All right. So I will, let me get everything here. I will make the motion to approve the final site plan for the Groves of Whitmore Lake, which is a vacant parcel south side of East North Territorial, east of US 23. And that will be case JPC 230010, which is Detroit Riverside Capital and Showstack Brothers and Company on behalf of Gold Corridor 23 LLC. That's parcel B0220400003, with the conditions listed in the OHM report dated May 19th, 2025. The Northfield Township Fire Department, a report on dated May 1st, 2025. The conditions listed on the McKenna letter dated May 23rd, 2025. In this following condition, that an appropriate agreement between the apartment, or subject, let me try this again, subject to an appropriate agreement between the applicant and the township on the southern half of the property as shown on the site plan and documented as presented to the ZBA, with the conditions that the area shall have only a 5-foot wide wood chip, dirt, or natural seasonal trail with only benches and no other structures or other forms of intrusion. Trail will be marked by property, or will be maintained by the property owner and subject to annual inspections by the township.
I'll support.
Motion by Stanilecho and support by Ms. Chick. Is there any discussions on that? All right. I guess we'll do a roll call vote on that.
Mr. Zarzaki,
Yes.
Mr. Stanilecho,
Yes.
Ms. Chick,
Yes.
Ms. Ganna, Mr. Thomas votes yes, Mr. Gordon.
No.
One thing I want to say on this is that I know this was a long time coming. You've been very good about taking consideration the changes that we've asked, and that makes the process, easy for all of us, as we can end up mutually working together. So I applaud you on that. So thank you. Okay. Got to find the minutes from last month. Anybody see any issues with the minutes from May 21st, 2025? Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, I didn't, they weren't in my packet, so I didn't get a chance to look at them. So I can't vote on it.
They weren't in my packet either.
I didn't realize they weren't in my packet until it was too late to look at them.
Did you have?
See them either.
No, I don't think they got into anybody's packet.
All right, well. I think technically they go into effect if we don't vote on it at our next meeting anyhow, so.
15 days or something.
Yeah, so I mean, we don't vote on it, it's, since we can't, it's going to go into effect anyhow, so. If there's any, I think probably if there's any corrections, we can correct it next time.
I looked it over. I looked it over online. I didn't see anything glaring at all.
Well, thank you, well, I guess we can't vote on that, so. There were so many minutes in this packet with different things. I looked at it, and I thought I saw the 21st of May, so. Yeah. It's okay. All right, final call to the public. Anybody would like to come up and speak? All right. Comments from commissioners. Start at Mr. Gordon. Mr. Thomas? Ms. Gannon? Did I say your name right? Gannon? Right, is that right? Okay.
I'll take it.
Mr. Zarzaki? Ms. Chick? Okay. Julie, would you like to say anything? Anything? Okay. So, I found out today that one of our long-term residents in our township passed away. This gentleman was somebody that I personally got to know. I served with him on the township board. He was elected 3 times to the township board. He was born and raised in the Northfield Township. A long family history here. His name was Wayne Dockett. Yep. And so people that knew him, he was a very stubborn, gentleman that had a real difference between black and white and right and wrong, and there was no in between. There was no gray. And he was very fastidious about making sure that he held to his ground and he was not swayed on one way or another. He frustrated me sometimes when I was on the township board with him because some of the things that we needed to vote on, he's like, I don't think we should be spending money on that, so I'm voting no. I mean, that's just the way he was. It was like if I didn't understand something, I was voting no. And I guess maybe he was right in that, is that if he didn't understand it, he should vote no. So he was very gruff to a lot of people, at least he came off that way. He was actually just the opposite. He was a very kind man. I was lucky to call him my friend, and he's going to be missed. So I just wanted to recognize him and the contributions he did to the township. With that, I want to make sure that we keep our men and women in uniform in our thoughts and prayers. Their sacrifices are allowing us to have our freedoms of expression in our daily lives and be able to carry on and do the things that we do. And yes, Ms. Chick.
I just wanted to comment on Mr. Dockett as well. It was very sad news to hear that. I served with him on the board as well, and he was basically the township watchdog, and you are right, there was no gray area with Mr. Dockett. You may not agree with him, but you certainly respected this man for speaking out and for stepping up and serving his community. He's been here, I think, before Whitmore Lake started, but he had so much knowledge of the history of the township, and he had very principled man, so he's going to be missed.
Okay, with that, the announcement of the next regular meeting, which is June 19th, 2025, 7 o'clock.
I believe it's the 18th.
Yes, 18th is a Wednesday, correct.
All right, we'll cross it out, we'll try it again. We're going to make the announcement that the next regular meeting is going to be June 18th, all right, 2025, 7 o'clock. With that, I make the motion to adjourn. Who wants to do that one? All right. Motion by Stanley, show support by Zarzeki. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?